Hello, Global Theater. My name is Gerry Fialka. Today is July 8th, 2025. Want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast, I'm Probably Wrong About Everything. Also want to thank Kathy Siegel Garcia for introducing us to today's guest, Ellen Burr. Where are you calling from, Ellen?
Larchmont area in Los Angeles, which is like Vine and Melrose.
How cool. First question is, what's the best thing for a human being?
What's the best thing for a human being? To think we, not me.
Oh, I love that. Think we, not me. Beautiful. What's your favorite form of information? How it comes into you?
Oh, audibly. I
Yeah,
definitely, I person to person audible. I mean, Zoom is a good thing because it connects us person to person now. Yeah, I do much better when I'm talking to a person, working with a person, rather than like reading it or trying to figure it out by text.
beautiful. Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Why do humans collect or gather information? Well, I think we're, like they say in Star Trek, bags of mostly water. But the information we get allows us to be open to our inspirations. I think the more we gather as far as technique and information and actually gather it, I mean, not just hear it, but process it and have it be part of us, then we have more tools to use to express ourselves.
Very good. So, do you think this need or want to collect information is more innate or more invented?
More, I like your questions. Um, I think it's innate. I think
Yeah.
it's innate. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it's that desire to keep growing and expanding.
Yes. Do thoughts create emotions?
Oh, boy, do they ever. Yeah. Mm.
Well, fill in the blank, Ellen. I don't know what I think until I.
I don't know what I think until I have time to process it by sleeping on it, by letting it percolate inside of me for a while,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is
Well, go
I
ahead.
was I was going to say, which is really interesting because I do like to improvise.
Yeah.
So the improvising is allowing me to express myself without thinking. Sometimes
Yeah.
I think thinking gets in the way.
Yeah. We're going to get into music, and that's an intense thing because that's like all the great musicians I've interviewed. Don Preston says, don't think. It's like, yeah, right. That's romanticizing it because you've learned these licks and they're in your head and you can reference them, but you want them to, you don't want to, it's trying to figure out this word think and feeling basically. But I don't know what I think until this woman recently said, rant about it for 30 minutes. So that's like you're like process it, sleep
Yeah,
on it,
yeah.
and it's time because McLuhan said, I don't know what I think until I say it. Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it. And
Hmm.
so,
Hmm.
can humans think without language?
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Because there's different ways to process. Like a
Yeah.
lot of times, I think kinesthetically. Like sometimes, I don't really know what I'm doing. I mean, I may, besides playing flute and making jewelry, all my artistic physical expressions. That's why the computer's so hard for me because it's so um,
Yeah.
it's not tactile.
Yeah.
So for me, I think with my fingers, and I think people can think in images, and I think you can think with feeling. I was studying a acting technique called the Michael Chekhov technique. And that was the first time that actually helped me to actually understand my feelings because it would go from a body sensation into a feeling. And then that could go into the thought of what is the motivation or the intent of the actor. So, yeah, I think there's different ways depending on the person. However, if I can keep going, I think that's one of the biggest problems of America nowadays is that we overemphasize the intellect and we overemphasize the thought process. And I think that a lot of innovation and a lot of independence and a lot of creative impulse is thwarted because people are trying to think or structure first. And sometimes when you just let yourself create or do it, you actually learn more about yourself and the situation than if you actually planned it.
Yeah. I worked for George Carlin. We got a flyer in the mail once and it said, I'm trying to get more control over my spontaneity. But Ellen, this is really good. I'm glad because we're here to have fun. Your observations of humans in general, are we more thinking beings or more feeling beings?
I can't codify that because I don't have the statistics, but I think everybody reacts from a different place.
Yeah.
And so when you want to try and group people into one way of being, you're actually limiting the amount of personalities that are out here.
Yeah. That's funny because most people answer, I think we're more feeling beings. I mean, 80% of people answer it that way. But Bridget Bardot says, when I make love, I don't think. I'm like, good luck. How do you turn your brain off? Or people who meditate go, now think about not thinking. And so, we invented these words, thinking and feeling. You can't really separate them, but we think we can because we invented the words. And there's a bumper sticker on a car in my street and it says, don't believe everything you think. And I'm like, well, you could say, don't believe everything you feel.
Mm-hmm. Oh, true. And my bumper sticker says, you are entitled to your own opinions, but not your own facts.
Oh, that's good. What Chomsky says, language is not just words. It's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history,
Absolutely.
that creates what a community is. What do you do when language doesn't work? When language breaks down, what do you do?
I use my hands and I try and stretch it out, or I make analogies. But back to this language thing.
Yeah.
I'm studying Japanese right now,
Yeah.
and I'm learning so much. I studied Spanish for a while too, and I'm not very good at languages, but I find that you learn so much about a culture by studying the language, by the language structure, by what words are included, what aren't, how they process the thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really good. Learning a language is important. So here's two questions from Alan Turing in the 50s. One
Okay.
is thinking a function of the soul?
Okay. You're on this thinking thing. So let me just tell you my ideas about thinking, which is what I've heard is the mind is a great, oh, how do they put it? A great slave, but a poor master, something like that.
Yeah.
And so I I think thinking is a process of the mental constructions of the information that we have gathered throughout our life. And that if we use that to help support us rather than lead us, that's when thinking is valid.
Yes. To support us rather than lead us. Very good. Because you anticipated a question that's coming up, but the second Turing question first is, can machines think?
Oh, well, what's AI? You know, I mean,
Yeah.
isn't I mean, your questions are all kind of inter interwoven because see how I use my hands when I can't come up with a word. Um, uh, because what we can think depends on what information we've gathered.
Yeah.
Okay. So, like, because of teaching, I teach all ages from 6 to 83. And depending on the way, depending on the age, I find depends as a lot of different things. But one of the things, if we're talking about thinking, is depending on the age, it's important about how you can relate information because of what information they already have.
Yeah. That's really good. Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Meaning,
Yeah.
meaning brings happiness.
Yeah, I got the question from Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. He says,
Mm.
happiness doesn't tend to last, meaning tends to last. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
Ram Dass, he, went through all his psychology training and his LSD experiments and then his meditation. And he said he got into studying the meditation because he found that the happiness didn't last. And
Wow.
the sense of openness that he got on his LSD trips, they were great, but then they always went away. So he was looking for something that lasted. And
That's amazing.
I don't think anything lasts.
Yeah,
So
that's good.
if we want it to last, we're fooling ourselves.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you brought up Ram Dass. He's one of my heroes. If you haven't seen Divine Grace, the documentary on him, there is a moment, and especially being a music and auditory person you are, where he's hugging one of his like students or people he works with.
Mm-hmm.
The microphone on both of them catches their heartbeat on
Oh,
the soundtrack, and
nice.
everybody freaks out in the middle of the movie, the filmmaker and everybody goes, oh my god, they amplified the heartbeat. And I mean, astounding moment in a visual medium
Nice.
film for sound
Nice.
to be the dominant.
Where is this documentary? Is it
It's called Divine Grace. You can find it anywhere. Yeah,
okay? Okay.
it's probably free on YouTube. But the next question you anticipated: does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're more so detecting it or more so creating it?
I'm sorry, I was writing down Divine Grace. Could you ask me that again?
Yeah. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're more so detecting it or more so creating it?
I think it's a feedback loop.
Yeah.
I think it's a feedback loop. Wasn't there a priest or somebody who was working with AI or Microsoft, and he thought that his AI machine was developing a consciousness or a soul, and they cut him off because that's not what they wanted to hear?
The they cut him off. The they is the AI, or who's the they there?
The Microsoft Corporation.
Oh, the corp cut him off.
Yeah. Do you remember hearing about that? I forgot when that was.
I want to look into that. That sounds intriguing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, what's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Oh, light. Because, oh, that's an easy one. That's a physics question. Of course, light is faster. Because you know that we see a reflection. And so if we see a reflection, we're already behind. I played for Catholic churches for a while, and not having been brought up in the Christian faith, there were some things that I had to figure out so I could feel good about contributing to these
Right.
ceremonies. And one of the things that perplexed me for the longest time was original sin.
Yeah.
So I thought, what is original sin? And then, because I've studied Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism, I like to study a lot of different beliefs. What I realized, the one thing everybody has in common is being absolutely present. That
Yeah.
once you're born, you are not absolutely present because, like I said, the reflection is what we see, it's what we hear. Everything that processes through us is actually slightly delayed because of this physical body. So that's what I came up with is the original sin.
Wow, the slight delay. Well,
Yep.
this is the other one you anticipated, almost worded it, Ellen. And this is Audre Lorde, the poet, said, "You can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools." Her colleague, Yvonne Rayner, said, "Oh, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?" And it doesn't have to be a tangible tool.
To do what? What do you
Well,
want
that's the
someone to
thing.
do?
You put the questions in the context you want. I open some of my questions with cue quotes. It doesn't mean you have to apply it. Basically, I'm asking what tool do you most gravitate towards? But you can apply it to dismantling the master's house if you want, and you can imply the word new if you want.
I think I would have to have that question processed through my sleep to be able to answer it.
That's Believe me, that is fine. That's a great answer because a lot of this stuff comes back around. And because I asked people the tool they most gravitate towards so often, someone said, "Well, what about a toy?" So then I added the question, "What toy do you gravitate towards?"
Oh, I like games. Right
Yeah.
now, I'm into backgammon and Rummy Cube. I
Yeah.
love games because there's the combination of chance and uh, structure.
Yeah.
I think that's why I like to improvise too.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
really good. What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
Um, if I'm going to be late for my appointment the next day, maybe
Very
that.
good. So McLuhan learned from a poet that artists are the antenna of the race. Musicians,
Mm.
painters, they're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions. So we might learn how to cope with what we don't like about our inventions. So I ask you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Um, I think that's twofold. Um, from the religious perspective, or not spiritual, but like organized religions, it seems like there's this need for, um, I was going to say a daddy figure, but
Yeah,
there's need for a figure to tell us what is right and what is wrong.
yeah,
From the intellectual, agnostic perspective, I think people want to see, want to be able to see, experience what it is to believe it. That there's a, um, you know, we keep finding all the time that things that we don't know or understand have been given um, over um, uh, have been given um, explanations that are fantastical. And then through science or exploration, we find out that what was once considered um, overreaching, which was once considered oh, dang, I hate, no, don't be, no words today. What was considered a myth has the truth to it.
yeah,
Or, like, for example, acupuncture, you know, before science could find out that there was actually truth to what people thought was metaphysical, they wouldn't believe it. So that is my agnostic intellectual idea that I think people limit themselves because they aren't allowing themselves to be open to energies or ideas that they don't understand.
Yeah. Really well put, Ellen. You evoked two major things. One is I studied pseudoscience, like what's considered pseudoscience. And
Mm.
they consider fasting pseudoscience. But if you go to these certain procedures in the hospital, they go, okay, you have to fast for a day before you come. Well, then how could it be pseudoscience?
Yeah.
And anyways, there's various degrees. But the other thing you were saying seems to be what Schopenhauer said. All truth passes through three stages. First, it's ridiculed, then, it's violently opposed. Then, thirdly, it's accepted as being self evident. I knew that all along.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting now. Oopsie. It's interesting nowadays because with all the fake news and all the pseudoscience and all the misinformation, uh, when is it that? And when are we just falling into the algorithms that are perpetuating our beliefs?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's, McLuhan's great line. You mean my whole fallacy is wrong.
Right.
You know, and the word lie is in the middle of believe. And
Mm.
anyways, disinformation just helps us become better critical thinkers. So if you go,
That's important. Yep.
I suspect that's not true, then go do the research and see
Yep.
what you come up with.
Yep. When my 98-year-old mom listens to Fox News, and when I went to visit her, she probably doesn't remember, but it was important to me at the time. I would watch the news with her and I would point out, okay, mom, that's a fact, that's an opinion, and I think that that's why I like my bumper stickers so much, because I think that people are conflating beliefs and opinions with truths.
Yeah.
And what is truth? What is truth? And that is different than what is true. And it's interesting, Gerry, because it's just a little loop, you
Yeah.
know?
Well,
Yeah.
then I would love to hear your take on Shelby Foote said, a fact is not a truth until you love it. I'm glad you laughed.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I think when you put your emotion to something is when you actualize it. I
Yeah.
mean, if you look at all the when was it, the 80s, when they were all the into the vision boards and actualizing what you want and stuff, they
Yeah.
always say think of it and put an emotion to it.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what this saying was expressing.
Yeah. Um, do artists have moral obligation?
I don't think you can say one way. I mean,
Yeah.
my favorite art movement was the Fluxus movement. Are you familiar with it?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and I mean, the reason why not many people know about the Fluxus movement is because um, they didn't make much money from it. So, I mean, artists have to survive like everybody. And unfortunately, we're in a capitalistic society where you need money to pay for bills. And I'm really concerned about all this censorship that's happening right now
Yeah.
because, it's that balance between do we, what is, quote, selling out, and what is paying your bills, and what is the balance between the two.
Yeah.
When I first, if I may continue, when I first came to LA, I went to see a concert of Jean-Pierre Rampal, and I was in line to buy a ticket, but somebody had an extra ticket, and he was a journeyman actor, and he said something that has served me so well through my creative life. What he said was he keeps in his mind two bank accounts. a spiritual bank account and a monetary bank account.
Yeah.
He said ideally every job would fill both 50-50. But when he's not feeling right, he finds out, do I need more money or do I need more soul satisfaction?
Yeah. Beautiful. You know, when you mentioned the Fluxus, it reminded me of Yoko Ono was part of that movement, and she had a great piece of art where she invented, well, basically all the artwork was a press release that said Yoko Ono's having an art show at such and such gallery in New York City. So she sent the press release to the New York Times and they listed it.
Okay.
But there was no art gallery and there was no art show. So that was the art piece being listed in the New York Times.
Interesting.
When you said sold out, I love it because I spell it SOULED, sold out.
Interesting.
And, Reverend Al of Flipside Magazine in LA, he said, "Don't sell out, sneak in." And
yeah.
Paul Schrader has a good one too. He says, "The role of the artist is to attempt to sell out but fail."
Oh, I like that.
I have some troubles with that because I've overanalyzed it. It sounds good, but it's also sounds a little snobbish. Like my art is so pure. I tried to sell out, but it failed. You know?
Yeah. You know, one friend of mine, she is so weird. She refused to buy art because she felt if you paid for it, it wasn't really true art.
Yeah. No.
And yeah, I don't believe that. But can I tell you another story?
Please, I
think it's a Hans Christian Andersen fable. If it's not, it's the other guys. Okay, the story of the ant. There was an ant that climbed up a tree and saw that the queen ant, what she said that she was the best and their little anthill was the highest and everything was wrong. So he came back into the ant village and he told everybody about this and they burned him as a heretic. However, there was one little ant that heard his story and climbed up that tree and saw what was being said. He came back into the ant farm and he talked in parables and mystics and around it, and they buried him as a saint. So when you said sneak in, it reminds me of that. We have to work within the system to make changes.
Yeah, definitely. That's what Frank Zappa always said. And then he would go out to Cal Arts and have all the creative people help him. You know, so that was a beautiful pill. And I'm for stories, anecdotes, tangents. You don't have to answer the questions. We're just here to have fun and talk. But the next one is, are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
Old ideas.
Yeah.
That's a quick one.
Yeah. Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
Let me see. The earliest memory, I don't know if it's my memory or I was told this story, so it's my memory, but I was like 5 years old or something. It's when we lived in Detroit, or did we live in Buffalo? We lived in yeah, that's when we lived in Buffalo, and my grandparents were in Detroit. And I went to visit them or something, and they were driving me back in the car, and I started crying, and I was like, I want my family. And they said they were family.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well, this goes for, well, is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
I love your either or questions.
You know, yeah, you love them. A lot of people go, that's a false dichotomy. I know some of these early ones are either or. It's really not. Yeah, it's really just a prompt to discuss, you know, how we process what memory is. Like, you know, I'll tell you here's how I do it. Most people say, is memory more a curse or more a blessing? They go, it's a blessing. Oh, well, it could be a curse. And then that's 90%. Every 10% of people go, oh, it's a curse. And it was like, wow, I'm not trying to get them to say anyway. I'm just trying to see what people say. And for someone to say memory is a curse is a little disarming, because we think, how could you teach music without memory? You have some sort of, memory involved. But could you if you didn't have memory, could you improvise better? Or not better, but could you still improvise? Because then so I mean, it's a stupid question, basically. It is, but I'm just curious, your impulse,
Because I have, I was going to say an older mother right now, but it could be
Yeah,
anybody. Everybody remembers things differently.
yeah,
And it's like, what about an instant or a situation that you remember? And um, it's interesting to me to notice, as my parents were getting older, how their memories changed. So some people might call it revisionist history,
yeah,
but what it did for me, since I'll always doubt myself before I'll doubt the other, I always wondered if my memory was right.
yeah,
So I think memory is fluid.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's a better answer, because first of all, it's just astounding. No one goes, "I like your either or" questions. You usually go, "I'm not into dichotomy. I'm not into binaries," and you're like, "Hey, I like your either or question." But it is. You didn't see. It's me and you versus the wording on the question. You didn't go for, is it more a curse or more a blessing? You says it's fluid. That's what I'm open for. Is us changing the wording on the questions.
Hmm.
So tell me someone within your immediate family who had an impact on you, and what specifically was that impact?
Well, I can think of several. I mean, early on, well, it's an early memory. Mom taught me how to shade when I was coloring in my coloring book, and it was that always struck me because I brought my coloring back home from class to my mom, and she was like, "Oh, these are nice, but why don't you shade?" And she taught me how to shade. And then I brought my shaded pictures back to the teacher, and she goes, "You didn't do that." I was like, "Yeah, I did." So, so it made me question. I guess that is a big thing that made me feel to know what I know and have a little bit more self assertiveness and just confidence. Well, there's always different opinions. And
Yeah,
so I think that helped me hold my own opinion.
that's a beautiful story. How, because I also like how on your website or one of your interviews, you said your dad taught you how to whistle through a pop bottle.
Yeah.
So it's like so simple. Your mom teaches you how to shade, and your dad teaches you how to whistle through a pop bottle.
Yeah. 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 Well, that
Well,
made it really easy to play flute because then when they gave me a flute, it was like, oh, I know how to do this. Yeah.
so the same question outside your immediate family, someone who had an impact on you, and what was that impact?
Oh, the the so many, but the first one that really I could think of was my English teacher. So I was brought up um, since I was 10 in Kansas, which is known as the Bible Belt. There was this English teacher, Mrs. Holland, who always wore high heel shoes, but she always walked on her toes, so you never heard her heels touch the ground. You never heard the clack of the heel. I took her in my high school. We had a semester where it was divided into three parts, and you could take different sections. I took biblical allusions, not because I knew anything about the Bible, because she was teaching it. And we were talking about some story that had to do with Pontius Pilate. And since I wasn't brought up in that faith, I didn't know who Pontius Pilate was. But in the class were all the Bible carriers of the school. And so I was like, okay, I'm not getting this unless I know who Pontius Pilate was. So I raised my hand and I said, who's Pontius Pilate? The whole 25 people kind of looked at me with their mouth open, like, who is she? And then Mrs. Holland told them, welcome her questions. You know, she wants to learn. And she helped me with that. And she also, so after that class, I was really upset. And I went to her and she recommended that I read Thoreau's, was it On Being? But something by Thoreau.
Yeah.
That really helped me through that difficult period. Yeah.
Yeah. That's it is. The questions are what's important. In fact, John Cage said they asked him a question. He goes, "That's a very good question. I wouldn't want to ruin it with an answer."
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
But it is. It showed you're willing to teach, and what a way to teach for her to teach all of them,
Yeah.
because they're all psychologically brainwashed with one way of thinking. Were any of them going, well, I would like to know too? So do you pray?
No.
If
I
God, go
well,
ahead.
you know what? I have to tell you about this. I used to make prayer wishes, I called them. Okay. So it was a prayer wish, I called them.
Yeah.
And a lot of quirky things happened. Like my favorite one was I was doing a flute audition, a concerto competition, and there was a in our warm up room. It was in a church. There was a nice picture of Jesus. I was just that's where I was warming up. I was looking at him, and I made the prayer wish that this would be the most memorable experience of my life. So I went through the first movement, all went really well. I played the second movement, and all of a sudden, I was in the Swiss Alps. I could smell the flowers and hear the birds, and it was beautiful. Then all of a sudden, the picture stopped. I was like, why did the picture stop? Because the music stopped. Why did the music stop? Oh no, I'm playing the music because it was playing by memory. And so I had no idea where I was, but it was a memorable experience.
It was like time travel, almost out of body
Almost.
experience.
It was,
It
yeah.
was. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if God does exist, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
Um, I'm going to, if God does exist, I'm going to tell you what my definition of God is.
Good.
My definition of God is the space.
Yeah.
Because if you look at an atom, there's spaces in between. Everything has space. And again, between all these different philosophies that I've studied, um, the space seems to be the most important. I love the Zen expression, try to be the not rock. So where we're all connected is by the space,
Yeah.
because we all have space between our atoms. If you just go to physics, that very basic um, point with the matter on this earth, the only reason things are put together by how the atoms form, and because we can't perceive quick enough to see the movement within. So that to me is what God is. It's a space, and that's where we're all connected.
That's what McLuhan calls the resonating interval, the in
Hmm.
between, the in
Yeah.
betweenness, or he even joked the gap is where the action is.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, you look at a painting, and a painting that's well framed has enough negative space among it.
Yeah.
You listen to music, and it's not the note, but it's the space between the notes. It's where the note, the the length of the note, or even the silence between it. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Beautiful. Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
Um, I don't think evil is an energy.
Yeah.
So I think that the way people have put together their thoughts and their needs, and how they think to get their needs met is what creates evil.
The hidden question really, Ellen, is how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And I'll set it up. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from The Mob and the Samurai, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So again, it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
I absolutely disagree.
Yeah.
Because I think the problem right now, I have so much dichotomy in our political system and within the, and it's really not dichotomy within the United States because only 2/3 of the people voted, right?
Yep.
So
Hello.
a third of our population who can vote, and that's not everybody who's registered, didn't express their voice. So it's not really a dichotomy. However, I think the problem is, I think Alan Watts is completely wrong because I think we need to understand. You know, we don't need to convince someone. We don't need to stand on our soapbox and express our point as being right. I think to know your enemy is to understand what it is they're needing, what it is, why are they doing what they're doing or thinking what they're thinking, what purpose is it solving for them, what meaning does it have for them. And when you can understand what their need or purpose or meaning is, then that way you can connect with them. And so I don't believe, I mean, Fellini said he needs an enemy. Yes, for a good drama, you need an enemy. You need something to have a foil. You need a foil to, but in life, I think that understanding is how you treat an enemy. Mm-hmm.
Brilliant. That's the two key words in studying McLuhan are understanding relationships. So it's understanding why you and them aren't getting along or there's some sort of thing going on here. But you brought up that Paul Krasner asked his guru, why is there evil in the world? And he said, to thicken the plot.
Yeah, there you go.
Which leads into this. This is Nassim Taleb saying, games were created to give non-heroes the illusion of winning. In real life, we don't know who wins or loses, but we can tell who a hero is. My friend said, well, villains don't think they're bad. They want control. Heroes want freedom. But here's the punchline leading to this kind of non sequitur. Gregory Bateson says, the anthropologist, if the criminal gets caught, does he go, whoa, my criminal skills weren't up to snuff that day? Or does he go, oh, I did something morally and socially wrong? So again, it's a lot of prompts. You can go wherever you want, but the basic question is, does punishment work?
There was one, I should write down when you say, because you say so much. There was something at the beginning that I wanted to respond to more.
Yeah, I'll say it because it's Nassim Taleb. Games were created to give non-heroes the illusion of winning. In real life, you
that's
know
the
who
one I
wins or
wanted to
loses.
talk.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. I've been thinking the other day, or just recently, about I want to write a poem that says, being normal does not lead to being famous.
Yeah.
Because if you look at so many famous people, they have so many narcissism, OCD, manic. You know, there's so many, quote, psychodivergent ways that impel someone to have the ambition to be famous or known or get their.
Yeah.
No,
that's amazing because there's a great line I love to yell when there's a heckler in the room. I go, you nonconformists are all alike.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, basically, what do you think? I mean, let's just do the Trump thing for a second. I used to say before he got in, I'd say, if Trump does not get elected, he gets thrown in jail and he writes a book and he says, "I'm sorry, I did wrong. Would you forgive him?"
He would never say he's sorry.
I
He
know.
always if that book would never be written.
Right.
He would write a book that says everybody was against me. I was doing the right thing. Yeah. No, yeah.
But
No.
I mean, in the long run, it's like when we threw the Enron guys in country club jails, or all the the bankers. You just they get a hand slap. What if Trump gets busted sometime? Will that do anything? Does punishment work? Is basically the question.
I think punishment and shame and guilt are all related. I
Yeah.
don't think you can truly be punished if you don't have any sense of guilt.
Yeah. No, that's heavy. So that goes along. James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin 100 years ago. He basically checked out. He said, "This is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree?"
Yeah.
Years later, Faulkner said, "Sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism." Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
I think because there's so much inhibition. Has to go with being a people pleaser, maybe. It has to go with being liked, has to go with wanting to be accepted, wanting to be valid, a want of um, personal, a want of being special. That's kind of cliche nowadays, but a want of some sort of acknowledgement. And
Yeah.
I think because of that, we do a lot of self censorship in daily life. And that when we can go see a theater or a play, it serves two things. For me, the biggest thing is when I love plays more than film, but when I go see a play, it's allowing me to have a cathartic expression of release feelings that maybe I don't allow myself to feel
Yeah.
daily.
It's good. Well, Ellen, walk us through, where was your tipping point where you said, music is my calling, education's my calling, jewelry's my calling? Where's your three tipping points? I can do that.
Uh
That
huh.
can that can be my bread and butter and my calling.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's funny. I fought against being a teacher for a long time because I wanted to be more of a performer, and I didn't want. I wanted to be more acknowledged as a performer. Um, One student really, this was something that really made me um, do get more involved in my own performing. Was when one student's mom goes, "Well, you're just the teacher," and I'm like, "What? What the heck is that?" You know. But I started teaching in high school. A girl came to me from a lower band, and she wanted help with a piece of work, so she could get in the upper band, and I helped her because I was first flutist. And then she gave me money. I was like, "What's this?" And she goes, "You just gave me a lesson." I go, "Oh, that's a lesson." And that's when I started teaching more. I started advertising for grade schoolers. And I've been teaching my whole life. And I almost went into music therapy, but that was too intense. I couldn't deal with the emotions. And I've often studied psychology, pop psychology, different books on it. And so to me, teaching is a wonderful way um, to relate to different people on the way they learn and the way they think. I
Yeah.
love doing that. And then playing, I in high school, I always was in creative writing, art classes, and band. So I always did art, music, and writing. Um, I was always criticized, not always, but often criticized in my writing for having dangling modifiers or not having the correct grammar. I was like, but I like the way I write. And then art, I didn't think I would find enough things to create. And music, I got a lot of acknowledgement with, and it was easy to succeed in that. So that's why I went into music. And the third thing was jewelry. The reason, like one of my art classes in high school was jewelry, and I always loved that. But how I got involved in having jewelry now and is I used to play for a lot of weddings and parties doing casuals, but I had some nerve issue on my left side, so I couldn't do the 3 hour gigs anymore. But being high energy, I needed something to do, so I found a community jewelry class. I started making jewelry. Then I went to a flute convention where it's happening in August this year, and I'll be there selling my jewelry. And one of the flute makers, who I always liked hanging out with them better than the flute players, but that's a whole nother story. She gave me a bunch of keys to play with because I told her I loved soldering because it's kind of alchemical, you know? And so I started playing with her keys, and then I gave it to somebody to take a Cynthia Kelly from Flutatious here in LA. I gave her a box of jewelry I made from these keys and asked her to see if it would sell at the convention. And it totally did. And so then I just started um, deciding, well, I'm just going to jump in and make my own line of flute jewelry, which you can
I,
see on flutejewelry.com.
which is, I love your diversity, because here's the one thing about education too. This is McLuhan in 1957. It's misleading to suppose there's any basic difference between education and entertainment. It's like setting up a distinction between didactic and lyric poetry on the ground that one teaches and the other one pleases. However, it's always been true that whatever pleases teaches more effectively.
Oh,
So I'm just,
absolutely. Oh,
yeah, I'm
absolutely.
curious your thoughts. Is there a difference between education and entertainment, and how does that? Because one, everybody says that, Ellen. Yeah, that's true. And one guy a couple months ago, no, he says whatever displeases teaches more effectively. So, any thoughts on that? Yeah,
Also, I think the problem with certain conservative movements right now is that they think education is indoctrination.
yeah,
And I think that one was left out in your quote. But
yeah,
I have found through my years of teaching and my years of learning that when it's pleasant, when it's fun, when it's entertaining, when it's successful, it inspires more of that. Now, that
exactly.
doesn't mean don't make a mistake, because mistakes, and maybe that's what that one person said about displeasure, mistakes show you where you need to learn or
Yeah,
grow or inquire. But if you're not getting enough, I hung out with the freaks back in high school, and I was always trying to get them to study and do sports and stuff, and they just wanted to smoke pot all day. So I tried to get them to like want to do something more with their life, and I found that oh gosh, how does it have to do with fun? Oh yeah, um, there's a certain point when you fail too often that you don't want to try anymore.
yeah,
And so if it's always about displeasure, that's just setting up the okay, you failed, you failed, you failed, you failed. There's a certain point when you fail that's like, why am I trying anymore? I'm not
yeah,
going to try. And but if you have the entertainment, the pleasure, something good comes out of it, then you feel like you have a certain footing, a certain uh, foothold, a certain grounding, and then you're willing to try a little bit more. And then if you make a mistake, you can just laugh it off, or go, wait, I was trying to do this and this was fun, but this wasn't. So how can I get this to be fun?
yeah.
So definitely it has to be um and I say fun, but you said entertainment, and I think when we entertain ourselves, we're having fun.
Yeah. You evoked two great ones. James Joyce said mistakes are the portals for discovery.
Mm-hmm.
And in Coleman Hawkins, great jazz saxophonist, said mistakes mean you're trying.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. And a lot of times when I'm improvising, like I say, I'm tactile. So sometimes I'll just move my fingers in a way that's not a specific note, and then a sound comes out that I wasn't expecting, and it's like, oh, let's explore this sound. So
Yeah.
sometimes, yeah, mistakes are portals are definitely true. Yeah, I'm
A
all there.
screenwriting teacher told me great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process when you're writing an Ellen song? You're not, or improvising Ellenness. You're not. It's not a commission. You're not playing another composer's piece. When you're writing your own thing, or it's even like when you're creating your piece of jewelry, what role does intention play in your creative process?
And also, I've been writing scripts lately. I have 3 short films that I've written, and we're ready to shoot them.
Good. Way to go.
So what I find is, um, for me, there's an original intent, but it's the creating of the art that actually helps me explore aspects of myself that I didn't know, and
Yeah.
also takes the story where the story wants to go. So it's
Well,
another, like
that's,
I said earlier, I think life's really a feedback loop.
yeah. Feedback loop's good. In fact, you practically quoted Milan Kundera wrote Unbearable Likeness of Being. He says, that is why I love writing, because the character that I'm writing about can go further than I can. I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, right. I'm going
Yeah.
to take a pen and paper and write a character. How can that character go further?
You let the character talk to you. The character becomes alive. That's the cool thing about writing
Yeah.
is the story, and the story evolves. I don't know how people write with like the whole outline structure and they fill it in. Maybe if you have to mystery, you have to do it. But then I don't know. I think that the character and the story and the situations kind of tell you where to go.
Yeah.
And that's what's fun about that. That's what's fun about improvising too, is when you're improvising. I always, like, I was teaching one of my students about improvising, and I've often said this: improvising is not about doing, it's about listening.
Yeah.
And the same thing with whatever you're creating. And you have to let some things go wrong. Like, I was upstairs the other day creating a new ring. I had an idea for this ring, and I thought I would do it out of wax, and I was doing it out of wax, and that wasn't working what I wanted. So then I took silver wire and started making it with that. And um, if I had an intent and I had to solve the intent by the way I was going to solve it, I wouldn't never get anywhere, I don't think.
Yeah.
Because for me, it just frustrates me, because I'm like, I'm not getting what I wanted. So
Yeah.
there's a certain freedom in allowing yourself not to know what it is you want,
Yeah.
and then you can get what it is.
Yeah. That's Steve Martin loves to quote David Mamet. Art is a product of the unconscious mind.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
it's still, we're very conscious. Lakoff and the neuroscientists say, we're 80% unconscious. I like, since we started an hour ago, I felt we're both here 100% consciously or 80% consciously, but they're saying it's the opposite. But it is funny because I'm curious your thoughts of, Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking of your listener, especially like when you're improvising? How much are you thinking of your potential buyer when you're making your jewelry? You're like, how much are you thinking of your consumer or your listener?
Mm, yeah. When I'm making my jewelry, it's funny. People always want the simple things that are kind of like my production products. Production, just, I mean, I make it all, but it's just the same thing. It's really simple. But every now and then, so I make enough of that because I know people want it. But then I always bring in one of a kind pieces that I've been playing with. And there's always certain people that gravitate to that. So I think it's a balance, like what that one guy says, the balancing the two bank accounts.
Yeah,
You
the
know,
two bank.
sometimes I have to do what the people want, and sometimes I don't. When I'm playing, though, I find that the solos people like the best are when all of a sudden I'm in the zone and almost taken out of me, and the music puts something through me. So and maybe if I did that more with art, I don't know. But I know with music, when I'm not trying to please the audience is when they are pleased the most.
Wow. We're going to get into that. I got to ask this question and we'll jump right into that. But first, McLuhan says everything we invent extends some humanness. So knife and fork extends our teeth. Shutter and a camera extends our eyelid.
Hmm.
Maybe even non-tangible, say religion or philosophy extends our consciousness.
Hmm.
What does the flute extend for you? What humanness does the flute extend for you?
It puts my emotions right into sound.
Yeah.
And without the screen or the veil of words. Yeah.
Here's the one you really anticipated, Ruth Draper. The key is to bring the audience up onto the stage and into the scene with you.
Mm.
It is they who must give you even more than you give them in the way of imagination and creative power. Yeah, that sounds great, but how do you do that? Like,
Mm.
how do you bring you're playing one of your concerts and you
Mm-hmm.
play many concerts in various settings. How do you bring the audience into the experience with you?
Well, when I'm doing classical music, my feeling is I'm I'm not a pure channel for the composer because I've got a lot of my own personality, but when I feel like I'm in the music and I'm presenting, when I'm not when I'm not thinking about them, then they can join me more because it's almost like the composer and I'm joining the composer, and when I join the composer, then they can come along.
Yeah.
And the energy I get from them is the attention. You can feel the attention. And it's really, for me, the hardest part is when I'm playing and people aren't paying attention. That's the hardest part.
Yeah. How do you transcend that? My wife's a pro jazz singer, and she started singing to Alzheimer's patients,
Mm.
and she had been paid attention to her whole career, and she came home crying. And then, as she did it over a couple of years, she got used to it and adapted to it. But it was devastating to not, to have people so much feeling like they weren't there. It was just how they express it. Then
Mm.
in the middle of one song, she's singing this rare Abe Burrows comedy song, and one of the patients started singing along, like all the
Uh,
girl with the three blue eyes, and it was like, what? Because they music stays in your brain in maybe
yeah,
dementia. But this is very good, Ellen. This is Leonard Cohen. The only way you can sell a concert is if you put yourself at risk. And if you don't do that, people know.
yeah,
What role does risk play in your creative process?
yeah, yeah. It's interesting because this Saturday, can I plug a concert that's coming up?
Sure,
This
sure.
Saturday, 2 p.m., Andrea Centazzo's film Anime Mundi is being presented at 2 p.m. at the Electric Lodge, part of their Daredevil Arts Festival. 2 p.m., Jeff Schwartz on bass, myself on flute, and Andrea on electronics and percussion are doing a live score to this film.
Nice.
And it's very fulfilling being part of that. And at the same time, it's making me think I need to put, I need to make my own thing again. I mean, it's been a long time since I've made my own piece, my own project. And I think maybe vulnerability has part to do with it. Because when I'm in somebody else's work, I can be as vulnerable as I want because
Wow.
I'm inside their vulnerability. But if I put my own work out there, it's it's scarier. It's
It's
more,
risk. Yeah.
it's riskier. Yeah, yeah.
But what's another? Because the two words I want to study the most in all these 1,000 interviews I've done in 40 years are vulnerability and empathy. What's another word?
Mhm.
What's another word for vulnerability? Because it comes up so
Mhm.
often.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I have 4 words on my door when I leave, and I don't often look at them, but sometimes I go through phases where I do. It's trust and vulnerability, and authenticity and audacity. And I think the more we trust in ourselves and others, the more vulnerable we can be. And I think to be authentic, we have to have a certain amount of audacity.
Yeah, it's beautiful. In fact, I interviewed a great rock singer, and I said, well, no. First of all, 99% of people go, yeah, risk plays a part in my creative process. That's a big part. He said, I leave risk in the dressing room. So to be a performer, you can't kind of come out on stage like shuffling your paper. I don't know what I'm doing. You got to act like you know what you're doing and have some sort of, I think he was putting it across as more like confidence. You have to sort of feel like you're confident in what you're doing, because if you don't, the audience knows that.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Oh,
yeah, go
Ruth
ahead.
Gordon has a great quote. Do you know Ruth Gordon's quote?
No, you mean from Harold and Maude?
Yeah. Oh, she's done lots of other things too. She
Oh,
was a
you mean
writer.
just in general? This okay? Go
Just in
ahead.
general. No, no, no.
Yeah,
It's not from the movie. It's just one of her interviews. She said self confidence is synonymous with courage.
yeah,
And so I love that. And I love to share that with my students because sometimes you go into something and you're not courageous. I think self confidence is the vice versa. I mean, sometimes I go into something and I'm not confident. That's more like that. It's like you, I don't feel confident, but I can be courageous.
yeah,
You know, courageous to me is something you have control over.
yeah,
Confidence is something that builds up through experience, through like what we talked about earlier, through the repeated successes.
yeah.
Yeah.
You really have ESP, because if you can see, there's my follow-up question. What does courage mean to you now?
Ah.
So what does courage mean to you now?
Oh gosh, I love courage. Courage means
Yeah,
jumping in and not knowing.
yeah,
Courage means the ability to know that I can, uh, whatever happens, I'll be okay.
yeah,
Courage is stepping into the unknown.
yeah. Well, here's Viola Spolin. You know this woman? She was
Mhm. She
uh
wrote
oh,
improvisation for theater games.
there you go. You know her. She said, if the audience cannot see your struggle to achieve something, they cannot root for you to achieve it.
Hmm.
What
Hmm.
role does struggle play in your creative process?
Um, well, like just with the rehearsal today, it was really interesting. Uh, there's a series of flames at the end, and I was going up the scale and trilling the top note. I was like, I couldn't trill this one, and and I could have just left it and gone on. But I think the struggle of how am I going to? I want to be at this peak and I want to trill and it's not working. So what can I do? So I think um, the courage to stay with the struggle. Yeah.
To stay with the struggle. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. That does take courage. So let's jump into music. What's the function of music?
To express emotion without the veil of words.
Wow. Well, then I have to follow up. Tell me an instrumental that makes you laugh.
An instrumental that makes me laugh. Oh my God. I don't know if I have an answer to that one. I can tell you, well, it's not an instrumental, a song that makes me dance wildly.
What's
But
that?
that's Kate Bush's "Waking the Witch" from the
Oh,
'80s.
nice.
Yeah.
I love you span so much of my lifeblood in the music you've played, from Mercy, Mercy, Mercy to Anthony Braxton.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well,
And I
that's it.
mean, and everything in between.
Yeah. Well, it's when people ask me what's my favorite music. That's a hard question because what you just said, there's so many different
Yeah.
um, varieties and so much, so many different ways to express yourself.
But here's the funny thing, I've been asking this question for a while, and one person said, "What's the function of music?" And they go, "There is no function." Stravinsky gave lectures on music means nothing. And I mean, I'm more of the Walter Pater school, where all art aspires to the condition of music. Like every art form, painting, poetry, architecture, all wishes it could be as cool as music, because music's sort of the best.
Uh, well, I think a question you had earlier about artists and being kind of the canary in the coal mine for
Yeah,
the um, time. I think
yeah.
that you can look at. Let me think. I had this in my mind years ago. Um, the there's I don't remember what order it was, but drama and music and art. I think I don't know, but they reflect. I don't know what it is anymore. Maybe it doesn't mean it to me. But I noticed at one point that different art forms are reflective of the period they're in,
Yeah,
the period that was, or the period that will be.
yeah.
And I don't. At one point, I really felt that. I don't feel that anymore, but I think it's still true, even though I don't feel it.
It's
Yeah.
it's it's a funny thing you said, because actually Wyndham Lewis said it, and it goes back to Ram Dass. He said, "Artists live in the present and write a detailed history of the future." So both Frank Zappa and James Joyce said all times are happening now, all at onceness.
Mm.
So
Mm.
Martha Graham even said exactly what you were saying at the beginning. She goes, "Great artists aren't ahead of their times; they are their times."
Mm.
So it's
Mm.
again, it's this resonating interval. It's like us trying to
Yeah.
define what time
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
But I'm going to read you some of the ones I've gotten on what is the function of music, and any of them you want to jump off on, you can. John Cage said it was the function of music, actually from his Eastern philosophy teacher, said was to soothe the soul and make it susceptible for divine intervention.
That's what I do at funerals.
Then Mickey Hart, the drummer of the Grateful Dead, said it was for survival. It was a warning. They hit the log and it meant they're coming to steal our food. So it communicated something.
Mm. Mm.
My friend Dylan Buston says the function of music is to dance.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Norman Zamchek says to keep us from going insane.
Oh yeah, music has been my saving grace.
Yeah,
When I don't know what I'm feeling or what to say, or when I'm all confused, play some flute.
yeah.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
fact, McLuhan's great line in that regard, he says, "You can't prove you're sane unless you have discharge papers from a mental hospital." Okay, here's David Moss. You might know him. He was a drummer and a avant-garde jazz vocalist. Music is the sound of being alive.
I like that. Who said that?
David Moss.
Hmm.
Okay, here's all the ones that normally come up: entertainment, pleasure, express creativity, connection, community, ceremony, ritual, learning. And you're named it. I have it in number 11, to stir emotion. Then Brent, you might know him, Brent Fisher, Claire Fisher's son. I met him when I met you on Kathy's Big Zoom.
Oh, okay. Uh-huh.
He said self-awareness. The
I think
function of music is self-awareness.
I think all art is
Yeah,
that. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
But here's the one that I'm really curious about. Oh, another one was healing. I think healing is a healing force, music. But here's the one I just got: to hypnotize people to be themselves.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, I think just like earlier when I said you can't define a group of people, I don't think you can define the purpose of music. I think
Right.
the situation it's in has
Yeah.
all of the above that you're talking about.
Yes.
But if I had to say one thing, I think it is a direct connection to emotion.
Yeah.
That can be healing, it can be self-discovery, it can be dancing, it can, you
Yeah.
know. One of my biggest pet peeves is when the music is really bad to a movie. Oh, can't
Yeah.
stand it. I love my favorite is when there might be something pastoral in the picture of a movie, but yet anxious in the music, or vice versa. When there's opposing, when a
Yeah.
composer, and probably it's the director who accepts it, but when a composer can play the underlying emotion that's not being seen,
Yeah.
that to me is the best film score.
Come on. Yeah, I mean, I've studied all those guys. Bernard Herrmann. I mean, who just died? The guy, one of the great was it Jerry Goldsmith or somebody died a couple of weeks ago. Who's that? But it varies. I know studying music soundtracks is huge. In fact, do you know this story about Betty Davis? And I interviewed the guy who wrote the book on Max Steiner, which he said Steve Smith basically says Steiner kind of invented the idea of the movie soundtrack. And he was very important in a lot of Betty Davis movies. And there was a famous line that he clarified for me. He says, Betty Davis says, I don't want Max Steiner following me up the stairs on this scene. Like what she to me was saying was, let me show off my acting chops without enhancing it with sound music.
Hmm.
But Steve said there was more to it because Betty's favorite composer was Max Steiner, and he was the guy she wanted. But it's interesting how much you want the film to tell the story, and then how much you want the music to enhance it or override, because then it just becomes this product so they can sell soundtrack albums.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know if you saw the musical Parade.
No,
It's
is it an old film?
it's a music. It's a theater piece. It's at the Amundsen right now. It's
Oh
amazing.
no, I haven't seen it. Tell
And
me
I
about it.
saw it. I saw it years ago when it was at the Taper. I saw
Yeah,
it 3 times when it was at the Taper. The music in that to me is so good.
yeah,
My favorite one is when he's doing kind of a song and dance while the girls are singing this haunting trio behind him.
yeah,
It's about a Jewish pencil salesman down in Georgia who was um, convicted of murdering a young girl,
yeah.
but he
Wow.
didn't do it. And it's a pretty and so there we go about morality and selling out. I mean, there's a really intense musical about this. It's the music's wonderful and the story is intense and yeah, I think everybody should go see it.
Beautiful. Well, Ben Ratcliffe is excuse me, is a music writer. And he said, I mean sound as it has long functioned among jazz players as a mystical term of art, as in Every musician finally needs a sound, a full and sensible embodiment of their artistic personality, such that it can be heard at best in a single note. So me and you could hear Miles Davis and we'd go, that's Miles, in a couple notes. And Ben summarized it in 2 words. Miles is fragile and pointed. He said Coltrane is large, slightly undercooked and urgent. If a music writer, and I saw your press page on your website was so good, Joseph, with all these people saying great things, if a music writer was going to summarize your sound, Ellen's sound, in a couple words, what 2 words would you say, hey, they got me?
Experimental and flamboyant.
Oh my God, I love that. And flamboyant.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I saw Derek Bailey play at McCabe's once.
That's fun.
Yeah, and I mean, he's playing all this just like all over the place. And he looks up and he goes, no one's walked out yet. Because he's the one who says experimental music is that you don't know what's going to happen next.
A lot of times, yeah. I knew somebody, and I guess when I improvise, you say you don't think when you improvise. Actually, I think a lot when I improvise because, I got my master's degree in composition. So I'm always thinking of improvisation as real-time composition.
Yeah.
And, if you just a basic composition, there's a bass line, there's the middle part, whether it's harmony or whatever, and then there's the melody line. It could be counterpoint, it could be obligato, but she said, and this is so funny, and it's not true, but she didn't like free improvised creative music. She said it's either scratch and sniff or pet store on fire.
Oh my God. Now you have to distinguish scratch and sniff means what? And I've missed the wording on the second.
Pet store on fire.
Oh, pet store on fire. Okay, how do you suss those out?
She felt like it's either people are just kind of ambient, slow, checking out where people are. So that's the kind of scratch and sniff, or the pet store on fire is where everybody's just going wild.
Wild, yeah.
And I think there's a lot more to it than that. But like I say, she didn't like improv. So
yeah.
But
no,
it always reminded me of that when I hear sometimes people just go in those 2 extremes, and there's a lot more layering you can do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I've been a Cecil Taylor wannabe my whole life because I learned one song on the piano as a kid. It's called Louie Louie. So I played it for 40 years and I learned how to improvise from it like Keith Jarrett, or I claim I do. But it's fun. And sometimes people go, that's fucking bullshit, dude. And then other people go, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So it is what you boiled down to so much earlier by saying so much of music is listening. And
especially improvisation.
Especially improv.
Yeah.
But where did you study composition at?
I studied with Walter Mays, who's now he died last year. He's a sweet guy. It was really fun to get to know him as a person because I went back to Wichita State. That's where I got my undergraduate in flute, and I wanted to. It's interesting because I studied composition with him, and I was like, "Let me switch to composition," and he's like, "No, you're too good of a flutist to switch." He goes, "If you quit playing, it'll take more time to get back to where you are. But composition," he was like, your ideas will always be going, so you can get back to composition sooner. So I got a flute degree and I studied composition with him. And then I went to Cal Arts for my master's degree, 82 to 85. And I studied with, my main teachers were Mort Subotnick and Mel Powell.
Oh, wow. You got good ones.
Yeah, they were, yeah. And Lucky Mosca was there. I took some 12 tone uh, 12 tone lessons with him. And a bunch of people came through. Louis Andreessen and Earl Brown, and yeah. Oh, what's the guy's name from Buffalo who has big thick glasses and writes really slow music? I think he's deceased now too. He
Yeah. Well,
oh
Cal Arts.
Morty Feldman, Morty
Oh,
Feldman.
Morton
Morty Feldman. That was
Feldman.
fun. Yeah,
Wow.
he told me I could walk on his rugs, and I heard that was a big compliment to have some. He would collect Persian or Indian rugs, and people would have to walk between them. But he told me I could walk on his rugs.
That is so rich with so many great people because
Mm-hmm.
Ellen, I'd love to plan a part 2 so we could get much deeper into music because maybe we could close this one out because we're almost at the 90-minute point.
Okay.
Is what Aaron Copland said, the 4 elements or ingredients of music: melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color.
Mm-hmm.
So, I've always struggled with what kind of question I want to ask people, but it's basically, how do you integrate or focus your feelings on using those 4 elements?
Mm-hmm.
Is there one that you're more attracted to, or you gravitate more towards, or the whole process of integrating melody, harmony, rhythm, and tone color?
Mm-hmm. Well, John Cage said that his teacher told him he had no sense for harmony. And
Yeah.
so that's why he went off and did his thing. I think I gravitate towards rhythm and tone color. Harmony has never been my strength because I learned music through flute, which is a single line instrument. I love counterpoint, but I'd say rhythm and tone color. It was the hardest thing for me playing with guitarists for a while because they could play the same note on different strings and it would sound different to me. So I had to learn how to hear that because I would hear the tone color. Because if you know, a pitch on each string sounds different with the tone color. So I'd say that's my go-to: tone color and rhythm. Yep.
It's funny because, Ellen, usually I ask people in non-academic terms, how do you explain to the normal, music person, or, a person who's not specialized in music, what is tone color? Because melody, harmony, and rhythm, most people kind of have a feeling, if they haven't even studied musical terms, what those are.
Right.
But if you say tone color, people say timbre, but I go, well, that's sort of an academic term. How would you explain what tone color is to the normal person?
Well, when I was part of several different composer groups, and since my music is not accessible as far as those 3 elements, I would give them a little bit of a talk before I presented my piece, and I would say how listen for listen for the combinations of the sounds, listen for um, uh, the loudness or softness. We call it dynamics, but loudness or softness, you're talking about late terms. Listen for the when notes, when different instruments come in and out, when they're together, when they're apart. I'm thinking specifically of how I gave this talk before a string quartet that I wrote that was kind of very spacious, and so that's what I would talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, it's been a real honor and pleasure, Ellen. You really get what I'm after, to have fun, and you taught me a lot. And I hope we can plan a part 2 because I'd like to get into things like silence. How do people know when to incorporate silence in music? Thelonious Monk said silence is the loudest sound in the universe.
Mm-hmm.
And you sort of touched on it.
Mm-hmm.
How do musicians know when not to play? Because basically they're taught how to play. And what you've done is been able to play orchestral music, play improv music, and teach it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you being very articulate and concise actually helped me learn a lot. So thank you so much for your time and energy.
Gerry, this was so much fun.
Yeah,
I
that's what
like
it's
your
all
question.
about.
Makes me think.
We got to do a show at Beyond Baroque together someday too. I do experimental music there with films and poetry and dance all the time. So
I hope to join you. And for the last 30 seconds, let me plug again. The
please.
Electric Lodge, this weekend is the Daredevil Arts Festival, and 2 p.m. Andrea Centazzo, Jeff Schwartz, and myself are playing a live score to Andrea's film Anime Mundi. 2 p.m. Electric Lodge, Venice, California. Please come.
How cool is that? And please spread the word, because I'd love to have Andrea and Jeff on my podcast, and anybody else you know in your circle of friends and artists and musicians.
Sounds good.
I'm going to hit the end broadcast button now, but I hope this never ends and we can keep talking forever and ever. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.